What happens during the Windows boot sequence? Imagine turning on your computer and watching it come to life, step by step. Each part of this process is like a carefully choreographed dance that gets your system ready for use. When you press the power button, the first thing that happens is the firmware, which could be basic input-output system or unified extensible firmware interface, takes charge. It runs a check called the power on self-test to make sure all hardware parts like memory, processor, and storage are working properly. If something's wrong, you might see an error message or hear beeps, and the boot process stops. Next, the firmware looks for the device to start from, like your hard drive or solid-state drive. For systems using the basic input-output system, it reads a small program called the master boot record. This tiny program contains the instructions to load the main bootloader. For systems with unified extensible firmware interface, it reads an FI system partition that holds the bootloader files. This step is like choosing which path to take to start your operating system. Then, the Windows Boot Manager, often called Bootmanager, takes over. It decides which operating system to load if you have more than one installed. If only Windows is present, it moves straight ahead. The Boot Manager then launches the Windows operating system loader, known as WinLoad. EXE. This program is responsible for loading the core parts of Windows into memory. It loads the Windows kernel, which is the heart of the operating system, and the hardware abstraction layer, which helps Windows communicate with your hardware in a standard way. Once the kernel and hardware layer are loaded, the system begins initializing. The kernel starts up essential system components and reads the system registry from the disk. The session manager, called SMSS, EXE, then begins setting up system sessions and starting critical processes. This is like preparing the stage for the user to step in. After that, the process called WinLogin begins. It manages user login, security policies, and loading your user profile. WinLogin also starts important services like the Local Security Authority subsystem and the Service Control Manager. These services handle security and background tasks needed for Windows to run smoothly. Finally, once you log in, Windows loads your startup programs and background services. These include applications you set to run at startup and system services that keep everything functioning. When all this is complete, your desktop appears, and your system is ready for use. Understanding this sequence helps when troubleshooting Windows boot issues. For example, if the system hangs during the power on self-test, it could be a hardware problem. If it stops after the boot manager, there might be a problem with the bootloader or system files. Knowing what happens at each stage makes it easier to identify and fix boot problems quickly.